Itamar, and we are going to start right now. Introduction. So I'm Mike Cizmar, the founder, CEO, managing director of MC+A, T consultancy founded in 2004. I've done search for about 20 plus years. We've been doing AI search for 9 or so. And I'm joined by Itamar from Big Data Boutique, Pulse. Itamar, would you like to give an intro of yourself?
Yeah, so I'm the CTO and founder of a company called Big Data Boutique, which is a consulting company, and then went ahead and bootstrapped yet another company, a product company called Pulse. I've been doing search in general and specifically Elasticsearch, OpenSearch, a little bit of Solar for the last 15 plus years. Started with Lucene, then Lucene.net, then Silucine, and then, when Elasticsearch and then OpenSearch came about, obviously it's a much better option for a distributed system and so on. And yeah, so Big Data Boutique is the company that provided consulting all of those years. And Pulse is now a brand new shining offering that we have, which is essentially an AI SRE platform for Elasticsearch and OpenSearch. And more announcement coming soon. And that's what I spend most of my day doing now.
Yeah, excellent. And I think I told you personally, but to the audience as well, as I think that Pulse is like the product that I've been on my shelf wanting to build because there's just, and that kind of leads us into this session and why we're here was that there's, for lack of a better word, there's just so much ignorance in terms and complexity in terms of what you need to do with your own search platform, even when it's managed in one of the hyperscalers or by the provider. And so seeing your product was like, oh great, now I don't have to build it. And we just started to develop our partnership from it. But in the recent, say, last 6 to 9 months, as it's been over the course of my career, probably yours as well, that we just have this pattern that we see from project to project, from client to client, where things that are very obvious for us going through it. I stopped counting search implementations around 250. I've worked with, I make a joke. I've got a wall of dead search company swag. Here's my Tivio mug. It's like, from a Tivio, they called it like the Sizzler. So it's monogrammed. I've got a few others here as well, but I'll spare the audience that. And when we go into one, it's just all this pandemonium, how are we going to do this? And you're like, what are you talking like? You're not even worried about the real issues. And over the past 2 years, what I've seen is there's been a flood of interest in what's called AI, search AI, and the same ignorance, and we're seeing it in the marketplace where they say that 95% of AI projects fail. And I think they need to put an asterisk next to that because I think 70 to 80% of IT projects fail, right? So it's within a standard deviation of what most projects fail. But the amount of investment that they're doing is a big, I think, red flag as well. And what I'm also seeing, and we'll talk about it in a bit, is like everyone's an AI expert, even though they don't know what they're talking about. So that's kind of why I reached out to you to have this session. And given your experience, your background, you can counterpoint and add in something for our audience. This is live, so do put questions in the Q&A panel. When we get through kind of the main portion of our discussion, perhaps we'll have a kind of open live mic if it's not, if you're down with that, and we'll really make a discussion. So this is meant to be sort of an ad hoc conversation, but the true consultant that I am, I can't go anywhere without a presentation. And so I put together some slides as a backdrop of like, let's at least talk about these points, because I think what will happen is we'll start talking and dive into something and maybe not miss them all. So this was yours, but no clear guidelines of relevancy. So as a red flag, as us as consultants, architects or leadership in a project, one of the first red flags that we see is this notion of relevancy. You want to maybe mention a little bit about this?
Yeah, so maybe I'll plug into what you just started saying just a minute ago. I think search was never cool until it was so cool as it is now, and just people don't call it search. I think that's the bottom line of the entire thing. So I don't know, you mentioned TVO, so you probably remember Fast and Google Search Appliance. And
I
so
got my
that,
fast
you know,
tattoo.
yeah, okay. I don't want to know where, but eventually it's search tech that was always needed. So Google Search Appliance, for those of you who don't know, you had this kind of appliance, this kind of a pizza computer that you have put somewhere within your organization. It was pretty good because it was able to index data on file systems and so on. And then you got Google within your organization. It was cool. And then Google decided to kill it. I don't know, like 15 years ago, somewhere between 10
Oh,
to 15
it was
years
a
ago.
bad Christmas that year, 2016.
You
Funny
remember?
story there
Yeah.
is we started the year off and I met with Google and we're like, great, what are we gonna sell this year? And they're like, yeah, we're gonna cancel it. I'm like, great. When? Now? I'm like, oh, that's interesting. What are we gonna sell this year? They're like, nothing. And I was like, what? The product hasn't been released since. But yeah, it was 2016, 2017 was the year that got announced as being canceled.
Yeah, and it kind of left a huge gap in the market on one hand, and on the other, I don't know, people found solutions. We tried to build something. Elastic acquired a company that essentially did that a couple of years after. So essentially, you had this. It was needed to some extent, but also with coming back to this relevancy part, people use Google Search Appliance, but what was a good result when you search, right? You didn't have a clear idea. You just trusted the Google algorithm because just Google knew what they're doing, right? And during trainings that I was doing, I don't know, in the last 20 years, I always had this question when I was talking about recall and precision. All right, so you're going to Google and you're searching something. You got back 10 results. You click on probably the first three, four, five, but so this is precision, right? So if the first results are good,
Mhm.
then I mean, you got the results that you wanted. But what if there is a better result somewhere out there that was actually indexed? I mean, the crawler did see it, but it wasn't in the top 5. Maybe it wasn't in the top 100. Then that's bad recall, right? So it's a result that is good, probably best, but for some reason, because algorithm, because a bug, because whatever, you didn't get it. There is no good way with Google, still up to this day, to actually know whether the results that you're getting are good. Obviously, Google know what they're doing. Obviously, it's probably doesn't happen a lot, but who says that if it happens or doesn't happen at all? And I think people are just not aware of this kind of trade-off. And then when you build a system yourself, let's say Solr or Elasticsearch based, and you start doing this, like let's talk about just plain search, right? No vectors, no AI or anything. Then you start getting those things from your customers because they search for something and the synonym wasn't found or some typo tolerance wasn't applied and so on. And then you can start understanding that there's a real problem. And then when you do this enough, you kind of derive back and say, who said Google doesn't have this issue on web scale, right? Um, so search was never cool because it's just an engine that does this, and it's really hard to get this right. And then people just didn't like doing that too so much, I guess, or it just wasn't as sexy. But there are some individuals, not many in the world, that do this and do this very well. And I think now in the recent years, suddenly, especially because when AI comes into the play and because data science is suddenly more of a thing, then you start seeing that more people are getting involved in that. And you have these rescoring algorithms and so on. Then suddenly people start to talk about this a little bit. I don't think people talk about this enough. And in the end of the day, when you add vectors to the mix, it's yet another black box now that's hard to measure. And then let's say you had good search, which is prefix, keyword search, and so on. Sorry, keyword phrase search, and so on. And then, you throw, so you have good precision, let's say. You don't know what your recall is because that's always hard to say, but you have good precision and you know how to measure that. But then you throw in vectors to the mix. Are you hurting recall or improving recall? And maybe precision even, right? So if you give the hybrid search or the vector search side too much weight, maybe you're destroying a precision. And I can tell you that many customers that we see are not even measuring precision.
They have no notion
And
of
that's
it.
a
It's
red
just
flag.
it's magic. I think you mentioned Google, and on the public side, so I have this phrase of token vomit and all tokens are equal, right? So the idea there is that people don't understand that whether it's an LLM or a search and at its core, every word is equal. That if you are indexing facts of some sort, that those there's no difference to the system who wrote it at its core. So Google came out in the late 90s, and Larry Page came out with the PageRank, which is sort of a pun because his name's Page, but it's actually not, it's not literally named after him. But that was, you gave weight to the inbound links. So the more links that you gave, that was a vote up of the authenticity of the content. So at its core, there is no authenticity or wait, like I talked about I had cancer a few years ago and I went to MSK and I went to the best doctor in the US for the kind of cancer that I had. Like that's the guy that you want to listen to, and when we came out with COVID, one of the things with COVID was like everyone was like just spouting out, it's even today. It's like, oh, I'm sorry. Are you an MD? Do you do research? Then why are you telling me about COVID or medicine or whatnot? But their tokens are equal the same as that head surgeon at an MSK. So it's just maddening that there isn't any notion that knowledge needs to have rank and weight. That you go to a customer and they just say like, well, we just point the system at it. We just point Google at it. Oh, Google will figure it out. Or SharePoint or 365 is going to figure out what that is. So I think that's right. Situations that I've seen that have a good notion of this are law firms, consultancies, analysts, where they say things like, well, we want to hear what the managing director said. We don't care what the intern said. So they say recency is important. Tenure of the organization. They want to essentially do collaborative filtering. They want to know who's got the most experience in a particular topic and boost those things up. And then they're, lawyers, as fun as they are to hang around, talk to, they're very specific about this sort of thing. And that I think goes to a great deal. But for the most part, people aren't thinking about that in their sense. So I think the red flag is that I guess the takeaway for our audience is I think of it also as a funnel, particularly in a lot of the solutions that we're talking about. So if we're talking about a RAG solution, we're talking about a funnel, which is the more that you can refine the context that you feed into the prompt, whatever the ultimate prompt is, the better. So as you mentioned rescoring, which means that you get an initial result set and then you rescore the documents based on a different parameter set, and so that you ultimately get a very hyper refined context to send to the LLM. And that's people just aren't thinking in those terms. If you're thinking about using it to extract a document, you need training data. You need to have outcomes defined, which are also essentially relevancy, and people just don't think about it in those terms. We'll kind of on that one for a little bit. This one's my current favorite. I posted this on LinkedIn. I'm not sure if people got it, but it goes to what you said, that search was never cool. Ted Lasso wasn't really a cool dude. And the play here, if our audience doesn't get it, is that 6 months or 9 months ago, I'm talking to people who are, you go to a meeting to describe themselves as, oh, I manage I work on the AEM platform. And then I get an email like literally like a week or two ago, and they're senior AI architect. And like, that's That's interesting. That's interesting. Same individual in my mind was like, yeah, we tried what we're doing and yeah, we failed. How are you guys going to do it? And I was like, well, it's a search application. So we're going to filter the results out. We're going to create the context in a very, it was like I turned the light on, you know? It's like, dude, this is a search app, you know? It's like, oh yeah, but I thought of it as a search app. I guess, yeah, I mean, he started mumbling and I haven't heard from him. But the point is that, you know, if I think I've mentioned this to you, like MC+A, I mean, we don't have competitors. I tell people we don't have competitors. We don't compete with what we compete with is internal resources and apathy. So internal resources are the Ted Lassos, are the hey, we've got Billy Bob, my cousin, who I need to have them do something. So they're going to work on this project. And you know, then fast forward, 70% of IT projects fail, right? Or apathy. We're just not going to do anything. So the just like the .com days where there was this like a magnet and iron going to it. Like there's just this attention going to AI and everyone wants to be part of the scene. And the red flag that I see is that you have people who are making PowerPoints. I told you about the podcast I just listened to. You're just like just utter word salads, you know, without any thought of an outcome. But so I'm just going to make this one up saying that you're playing the wrong game. I mean, you have, or there's that movie 300 about the Spartans, you know, it's like, well, we showed up with more soldiers, right? We show up with more search experts or AI experts because that's literally all they do. And the folks that we know, folks that are on our team, they've been doing this 10 or 20 years, you know, and it's not that you have to have that experience, but like you said, it wasn't cool a year ago. What's
Yeah,
your
I think we switched from nobody's doing search because it's a niche thing and an expert thing to everybody's doing search but ignoring it, right? Just looking at the bottom line of yes, they build a RAG application, but the retrieval side of it is just it's built for me. I mean, Elastic has it built in, or AWS has this knowledge base, Bedrock knowledge base. I just do it. Okay, but how do you do it? And I think a couple of things that worth thinking about is one, with RAG, when you do retrieval, when you do the search side of it, first it can and should probably be iterative. I mean, nowadays it's should be more agentic, right? So it basically, you search for something, you get results, the agents should check if it got the right results, it should refine the search. Everything that we do as humans on Google, the best way to think about it, should be done by an agent. That's one. But that's like, I don't know, advanced, right? Let's talk basics. The second is, before you pass to the next stage of generation, of kind of taking the data, the text that you have extracted from search or retrieval, and putting it for generation to generate the answer, that specific stage, I mean, we're engineers, right? Test that. I mean, it needs to be unit tested. How do you unit test retrieval? Evaluation. Evaluation is essentially this test suite for RAG applications in general, but this is tests for retrieval. Now, if it's just single step retrieval, it's fine. If it's multi-step, agentic, and so on, it may be more complicated. There is a whole conversation about LLM as a judge. Whether you should use it or you shouldn't use it. Maybe you have slides about that. I don't know. I didn't look too deep, and we can open that discussion later. But it's a good first step to definitely try. And one last thought about that is that I'll make it two. So basically, the right thing to do, and it's a big red flag here as well, is LLM is a language model. It's not a knowledge base. So we see so many customers basically saying, yeah, we will just go to Claude or go to Gemini or whatever, and we just ask it the question, and we just use the answer. So don't do that, right? It's an LLM. Yes, it has knowledge because it swallowed mostly Reddit and then some. Speaking about a reference about MDs, Reddit is not an MD, but it swallows
no, it is
most
not.
of Reddit and many books, they say. But in the end of the day, it's a language model. You should never rely on its
Good at predicting
understanding.
the next token, right? Like
Exactly.
Really good
It
at.
will spit whatever it learned. Yeah. And speaking of which, you can also think about it as a huge search engine. So Gemini has this huge context, if your knowledge base of your entire company is 1,000 documents. We see a lot of those as well. It's not that big, right? You can literally throw your entire knowledge into one prompt and have one or two short, concise instructions, and the LLM will do the search for you, essentially, in that sense. So this is also a pattern that I don't know if you should do it, but it's definitely applicable in that sense. So, compiling all of that into what we just discussed, you should think about those components as software components, and those should be used as software components, as Lego bricks to some extent, and you should test those in every step of the way. And Michael, if you want to take the questions, I see we have two questions.
I saw that fine tuning. Are there any measures? I think everyone can see these, so I read them out. But with respect to, I think we could segue into the next slide, and we'll kind of talk about this as well. And you mentioned it, that throwing a vector at it, right? That we have utterly seen smiles come off people's faces when we explain them how you vectorize a large corpus. And there has been vast improvements about it, but when you take, so you said the use cases out there, the demos are, hey, we have 1,000 well-groomed, perfect markdown, FAQ type of content. And then I'm like, well, I've never been called to work on that. I mean, we get called on 3 to 5 million documents. We have a bunch of duplicates. We have a bunch of garbage. And the pattern there is that you break it into passages so that you have the sharpest context, which that means that the 3 to 5 million documents could turn into, let's say, 50 to 100 million documents. You have to create an embedding for each one. You have to, which means it's make a call to do that. You have to store those embeddings, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But it's also that Google released a paper a few weeks ago, and on the first pass, I was disappointed in it, but they were basically saying the limitations of vector search. I don't know if you've read that one from their Google Minds group. The reason I kind of question is that when you look at the vectors of the content they made, it's kind of gibberish. It's not natural language. So it's not, and I know that they did that to push the model, but it would be better if I think they did it a different way. But I was talking with a client this week, and they're like, well, we want to, let's do vector search. And it's like, what? It's a product catalog. We can look at the description, but really you're trying to do an inverse passage retrieval, right? That's when it's most effective. 6-7 years ago, I'd say, who won the Battle of New Orleans? It's a battle in American history in the War of 1812. It was Andrew Jackson, right? So there'll be a sentence that says Andrew Jackson won the Battle of New Orleans, but if you did that without a vector search, you probably wouldn't find them, because those tokens are so common. So everything's not solved with a vector, and what we're seeing is hybrid searches, which is doing a traditional keyword search with a vector search, is more prominent. Russell Proud and I published a article, I think 2 August ago, about, particularly in e-commerce, the effectiveness. We saw at that time a 3 to 5% improvement using vectors and hybrid over traditional lexical. We also did sparse vectors. So those are something else we can talk about. And at that time, it'd be very difficult to justify the cost associated with that improvement, because the cost to, we had a large B2B e-commerce. I mean, I'm talking, I think they had about 100,000 to 200,000 products, but they had to index it a certain way because they had entitlements and warehouses and et cetera. They were looking at it costing $1 to $2 million a year to create the embeddings, just the embeddings, right? And then you look back and say, okay, well, we're going to get a 3 to 5% uplift. And it's like, that's hard to justify. And that's before quantization, bit vectors and such. So that kind of changes the dynamics. But what do you see with
It
people
changed,
kind
but
of go?
not completely. I mean, it's still costly.
It is.
At scale, we see a lot of situations or solutions that do a lot of tricks to not embed everything. And there's various ways of doing that. Sorry, I interrupted you in the middle, but this short context windows thing that you described. So my document is not a document, it's actually a product title or a name or image description of 3-4 words or something like that. We do that quite often with customers, but in some cases we just find that it's just easier to take the word, execute with a fast LLM, so not necessarily Claude or GPT, but I don't know, Amazon Nova Pro, for example, which is very fast, but it's still decent. And then you basically tell it, you are a business analyst, you get this word in this context. I don't know, you get, crown in the context of history, and give me the synonyms. So you would get queen, king as synonyms, or in the context of jewelry, and then you would get, I don't know, diamonds or something like that. So LLMs would be much, much better, and it will cost you per call, but in the end of the day, on large catalogs, maybe it's even better precision, better cost than embedding everything.
Yeah, I associate turn it. And so essentially they're not using vectors in the performance of search, but they're using it in the workflows for curating the content. They're parts wholesaler, manufacturer. So they're using it to load up like what you used to do back in the 90s and early 2000s. You just use that keywords field in your HTML. They would put keyword fields in there, boost, do a boost on the lexical query with that. They would optimize based on content and clicks. And he'll go to the grave saying that the best AI that you can do for search in e-commerce is essentially learn to rank. That you take the keywords, what people click on, what people buy, that little pattern, and then simply boost them up, which is the ultimate democratic solution. And for him, there's nothing better that works there. So what does someone search for? Assuming that you have the recall that covers it, what do they click on? Just rank based on that order. And he found it very, very affordable because you can just do that on a batch. You don't need an LLM, but it's not that everything is a vector, and the content has to be in the form of to have that echo back, right? Like who won the battle, like Jackson,
and you need to have traffic.
Yeah, I remember the first vector search I saw was probably 6-7 years ago, and it was looking up how tall a retaining wall had to be, which it just blew me away that we could find that little passage in there, which is another key. So this one, I think kind of we have a couple of questions about, and this is what crushes most of the POC to pilots that I've worked on is getting a handle on sizing. What are some of your sad stories that you've come across with recently?
I don't know if it's a sad story, but first you need to understand as someone who is about to do it, that if you do need to have vector search, you are going to be needing much stronger hardware. So I don't think we're in the age of GPUs really just yet. Elasticsearch, OpenSearch are not really ready to be using GPUs yet. I'm not sure about the other engines like, I don't know, Qdrant and Pinecone and others. Some can, some cannot. GPUs would help with speeds, but will also, again, cost more in terms of hardware. I know there's a lot of movement around FPGA today, so programmatically wiring essentially GPUs to optimize them for this, or CPUs to optimize them for vector search and so on. We just have a story from just recent weeks. Like a customer with around 400 million documents that are doing lexical search. Everything is working nicely. And then when they try to do a vector search or hybrid search, in that case, the latency goes up. We find ways to do this that it's not too dramatic, but in order to do that, we need to have a significantly bigger cluster. So vector search, if you don't have a lot of vectors, it's kind of a no-brainer. It's just a brute force KNN on the vectors. If you don't have enough, like I would say below 100,000 or even 1 million sometimes, depending on the vector, the search latency would not be too noticeable anyway. So you can just do KNN, everything is fine. Once you go beyond that, you need to start using ANN, and then it is CPU bound to some extent, but it's also memory bound, because you now need to create those kind of indexes for vectors, HNSW or any other approaches, and the hardware needs to support that. So you would need to have more hardware. In our case, the story that you asked me to tell, and just something that just happens in.
I just knew you had one.
Days. No, we have many, right? But this specific one is interesting because the customer was just not aware of that coming in. I just expected the hybrid search just work like lexical search works. And then we kind of had to show them how lexical search works very efficient when it's just lexical search, just keyword, phrase, so and whatever. Again, they also don't have any ways of measuring recall and so on. They basically kind of doesn't matter what they do, but they basically just open this up for their customers and then measure this with, I don't know, Google Analytics or whatever, to just kind of measure conversion at scale, just test in production, sort of, instead of creating evaluation set and so on. But that's what they do, and it works for them. So what we did with them is to kind of let them do lexical search, be happy with it, improved a couple of things over there, and then on the hybrid search side or vector search, we worked with them to kind of just do this some sort of A/B testing, canary testing, to kind of let a couple of their customers to use that and see how that works, and then justify the business case to double or more the hardware needed for the entire search thing, right? So you just play this by the business case, and it could easily double or more the required resources.
Yeah, I have a couple of sad stories, actually. I'm just posting if anyone wants like the more raw data, I'm happy to send it. I think I have it in PowerPoint too as well. But working mostly with like OpenSearch and Elasticsearch has been what we've used to store these knowledge bases for customers. And I have three that come to mind. First was this organization that had 2 to 3 million long form, regulatory type of documents, and they were spending like $500 a month on their Elastic Cloud instance, and we were like, yeah, you're gonna have to get a bigger boat. That's a reference from the movie Jaws. They wanted vectors, and we did the math, and it was like they're gonna have to start to spend $20,000 to $25,000 a month on the cluster. And why is that? Kind of to your point that when you pull up make an embedding, it's the number of dimensions, and the number of dimensions by the type of variable that's in it. Is it a full float? Is it a integer? Is it bit? Those are kind of standard computing terms. And so the number of so it's 2 bytes times the number of dimensions times the number of embeddings. And so I think they had 60 million to 100 million embeddings or something based on that. And those are not stored in Elastic itself or OpenSearch itself. They're stored in this side structure because it's built on a scene. And which then requires you to have more RAM. So that the typical RAM there's this kind of generic rule that if you have a 64 gigabyte machine, that you dedicate approximately 32 gigs of RAM to the instance of Elastic running on it, the JVM. But these are stored outside of it. So then you have to split it into a third. So it's a third, a third, a third, or something. But essentially you have to figure out exactly. They've added a API call that you can do to it, but about how much RAM you need. And so when we did that calculation, it was just like, yeah, you're going to need a lot more RAM to do these searches. The just recently came across this implementation where these folks are generating. I think they had 1 to 2 million docs, but the very same scenario. They're making embeddings. They had a hierarchy. They had nested documents, and there the issue was primarily death by shards. So, and also kind of going back to that Ted Lasso moment, like, no, there was like, I think if you did a Salesforce project or a SAP project, Oracle project, there would be an owner of that system. There's literally no owner of Elastic, for it. And so it looked like there was 5 or 6 different chefs, each doing something, but you do one thing, but then you don't undo the other thing. So every index that they created, they had 5 shards associated. So if you don't specify it with Elastic, you get 5 shards. And for the audience, a shard is essentially a leucine index, and it's the most atomic unit of a cluster. So
they change it. It's default 1 shard now.
Yeah, not for these guys. It gets worse. So then, actually, we'll use a rolling index. So what you can get Elastic to do. So if you're doing streaming data, you can just have it like kind of chunk out like it was spitting out loaves of bread or something, just chopping it. So every 50 gigabytes, it was chopping it, or every day. So they started applying that. So what they ended up doing was every day they created a new index, or every 50 gigabytes for everything, and with 5 shards. So when they, thanks, Jesse, it's data stream. So they use the data stream feature, which is normally associated with just immutable data that's not going to change. So so then they make an alias, and like literally each search is going against 700 shards. Every search, and then they're calling it multiple times. And the issue there is that when you issue a search, each one of those shards consumes a search thread. And by default, Elastic will assign essentially 60% more than the number of CPUs that you have. So it's like times 3 divided by 2 plus 1. But so each time and then you have a queue of 1,000 threads. So after you consume all of your CPU threads, it'll start to queue them up. So essentially, every time they were doing a search, they were just maxing out the system, and they came to us and they wanted like X number of concurrent users. And I was like, well, you need to get 10 times as much hardware. And it was like,
there's a couple of ways around it, but
of course.
This is basically why we build pools, right? But here's the fun part. Elastic just treats vector search. Elastic just treats vector search as a standard search, which I guess it's fine. But it doesn't let you to do any measurements that are specific to vector search, like, I don't know, ANN, graph, HNSW, size of memory, stuff like that, which just you mentioned. OpenSearch actually does have this. So I'm an expert with Elasticsearch, OpenSearch, some Solar. I'm not an expert with, I don't know, Vespa, V8, Pinecone, all of the others. So maybe they do have things that I'm not aware of, but specifically Elastic doesn't have APIs to let you monitor vector search. OpenSearch does. And that's, I think, to kind of lean on your point, it's a huge differentiator on that sense.
Yeah, and I think Coy posted this. I know Coy from back in the day, we used to sell search together. And the challenge, this is kind of one of those little triggers for me that, going back selling search for about 20 years, we couldn't go and, or let's say we would go and sell a search use case, and the inspiration or the excitement to make your employees more proficient was just literally never there. And we could, unless you were in certain use, we kind of sold in 3 ways. We same to this day. Is this going to make you more money? Is it is it an e-commerce solution that's going to increase cart value, conversions, etc. Is this a solution that's going to make you more productive? Is it going to do case deflection? Is it going to, and you'll hear Salesforce talk about like their improvements with that and agents, etc. Agents instead of agents, pun, doing that. And then there's like this middle ground. So I have like a presentation that's make money, save money. And the middle ground is compliance. So that's just because you have to. Like you have to be able to find every email about, someone that you bank with or your customers, etc. There's just a compliance reason. So in selling it to customers, it was always very difficult to get them to understand how more productive or what the loss was or the efficiency when it was just employees. It's very difficult to manage productivity. I mean, unless you're doing insurance claims adjustments or baking cakes or stamp and steel or something, it's very difficult, particularly for a knowledge worker, to say how efficient it is unless you get into cases like customer support or sales, because there's always metric driven. You turn it a little and say, okay, ignore the employees because we don't care about them. We're ugly fascists, capitalists, or whatever, right? But these agents, these agentic AI, they can't find what they're looking for, and all of a sudden, CEOs like eyeballs are big, and CFOs like, what do we need to do? We got to get these computers more efficient. Like, don't worry about the employees. We're going to get rid of them, but we got to make these agents more efficient. I'm being a little sarcastic, of course, but it's the same model, right? Like, again, it goes back to like nothing's changed, but oh wait, we got to make these agents more efficient. And boom, but there's a difference. There is a definite understanding of how much poor search costs in the efficiency of agentic workflows than it does in a business analyst trying to do that same task, right? And that's the difference. But if you have those metrics, that's how the investment gets made. So you have it when it's programmatic because you can simulate it, you can say A versus B, etc. But people in particular don't want to be scrutinized that same way. But thanks, Coy, for that question. Moving on to the next one, we have, this is my favorite, the garbage in, garbage out. Like
I think we kind of addressed that with the get answers from a doctor by leveraging the knowledge of Reddit.
Yeah, but there's a very large manufacturer who I work with who just had lassos. They just searched all the owner's manuals and they were like, why is our rag solution garbage? It's like, because every owner manual is pretty much the same, right? They didn't think of it in that kind of like we're creating the context, or I'm presenting the Kennedy files as a use case to CAN World next week. This is just like scanned documents, handwritten, scanned. It's an ugly world out there. So one thing is the authenticity or the expertise of the fact of the tokens that you're ingesting. But if you ignore the fact that you have to clean it up, take away the headers, create something that is sharper, right? Do knowledge management, right? Guided exercise. Do knowledge management. Curate your content. Don't just put it at SharePoint, right? And expect that. I mean, we've been around for 20 years. I mean, our SharePoint it's like the old file systems, right? It's where all good content goes to die. Yeah, you need to curate that stuff. Get rid of it. Maybe not get rid of it, but deprioritize it, etc. Clean it up. And yeah, we kind of hit this one, I think, right on the head.
And obviously chunking strategy. I mean, even if you have a good document, you should definitely make sure that it's written in a way or rewritten, right? So you mentioned a good practice is to kind of rephrase it as FAQs. But regardless, I mean, even if you don't, for example, we did a project for a law firm wanting to find laws and kind of, legal documents. So you're not going to rephrase it, but you do need to chunk it correctly. So chunking strategy and so on. I would also categorize that as part of the garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. I think kind of beat this one to death, but like I think everyone's equal. If you're going to invest in your AI agents, you should invest in your people as well, and under in your workflows and your optimization, which is a huge kind of segueing right in. It's like for the past 2 years, people have come to us and said, "What can we do with AI?" And I'm like, "Well, I could tell you what we're doing with AI. We're doing all the things that we don't like doing. We're doing the things that are hard, that are repeatable, that are hard to
Yeah.
scale, right? It's the same of, today there are manufacturing plants which have humans doing things, and it's because humans are faster to train than the machines that do it for certain tasks, or that they're changing the what to produce on a particular day, and so humans can do it faster, can do that change faster. They just say today we're making Nike shoes, tomorrow we're making Reebok shoes or something else. But that sort of diversity in the production lends itself to humans better than a machine that's just kicking out cookies or something. Most organizations, low level, don't have their workflows defined. And so you're going to say like, well, we're just going to have this AI thing do it. It's like the thing that organizations want is deterministic outcomes, right? So I was listening to something this morning. It's like, to me, this is like when this can get done, AI will achieve its dream, which is book my travel. I don't let anyone book my travel. I have very, very specific goals. It has to tie with my plan, my preferences, etc. I have a very deterministic outcome in mind, and people do too, but they don't say it, right? One of our MC+A tricks is we don't really ask for requirements when we do a search project, because we get the same 5 or 10, like it's got to work by Google, et cetera, et cetera. But the moment that we index everything, we show them, then all of a sudden everyone's an expert. They're like, why is this result here? So they have it. What I'm saying is they have it in mind, but they don't articulate it. You're not going to get, hey, here's this Visio or this Miro that can we implement, and here's where they think that AI is going to do that workflow, instead of saying AI is going to plug into the workflow. AI is going to make a determination on a claim process. AI is going to make a determination on a document type, right? And you're going to kind of do different flows. Are you seeing people with a significant, well-defined workflows?
Yeah, so I think it ties really, really strongly back to what we discussed on evaluations and relevance, because if you will have good workflows, and yeah, unit tests, and basically we said earlier, for those who joined us after, that evaluation and relevance ranking and so on is the unit testing for essentially RAG, but search in general. So I would tie that strongly to that. That if someone has that, they will probably have some workflows defined because they are working in a very meaningful way. And for those who kind of just throw RAG at it, and we see so many that do. I just had somebody tell me 2 days ago, yeah, we'll just build an AI agent on that. It's easy. So no, right? It's easy to get started, but are you going to rely your production system, if it's in, I don't know, AIS or whatever, your conversions rate and so on that? I don't know about that. So that's that. In
Yeah, I
terms
mean,
of
testing,
RAG and
testing,
so on, that
testing.
would be,
Like I look
yeah,
at,
again.
I'm impressed when I see a project have proper unit testing. I'm impressed when someone has a test-driven methodology. I'm not impressed with like, some skinny jeans, front-end UX developer because they wrangle some JavaScripts. Like, well, where's your unit test? Like, so this is, I mean, that's a significant level of maturity. It's like thinking again that we have a deterministic outcome, that we're doing something that has a little bit more permanency. And this is just a phrase of, do it over East, but like unit test, schmess, it's like you kind of mumble it, to kind of bypass it and kind of ignore it, right? So yeah, let's pull up the unit test, and it's like you said something offensive, right?
So
like no,
when we
seriously.
started writing more unit tests, I mean, convention time, right? I mean, nobody really does unit testing, or very few do. So we actually started doing tons more testing, unit testing, integration testing, system tests, all of that. Actually, when Gen AI came out and Claude Code or Cursor became actually competent junior developers in that sense. So I can sit in a meeting. I'm not doing this right now, but I can sit in a meeting and have like two more monitors on the side here, and then basically be in the meeting, and in the meantime give orders to those junior developers, write a test to this class and so on, and it will actually figure out really strong, really good, edge cases and things to test. And obviously it also knows how to write really good unit tests because of all the GitHub and Reddit that it swallowed over the years. So all in all, yes, but surprisingly, Gen AI, I think, actually improved the Gen AI testing in many places.
Yeah, we got into unit testing as our working through ingestion pipelines and having to work with data sources that weren't readily available. So, when we long story about MC+A, we have a lot of nearshore developers, offshore developers, associate team members, and like, look, sorry, little guy in Argentina, I can't give you access to the mainframe or data server at this insurance firm. You need to write a unit test to figure out what's going wrong. So we started mocking the systems, Office 365, whatever terrible Oracle system that we were developing, so that we could write a connector for it, because we would literally write connectors without having access to the system. And I'm just showing, this is sort of my philosophy around it. I don't know if BDD was meant to do this, but I see Marilyn on there. Marilyn and I worked through this a little as well, where we take this concept of how we engage with what's written as the major features in a statement of work, and break it down into unit tests. And so unit testing is near and dear to my heart. And it's just the industry's catching up with it with respect to AI, with inferences and deterministic outputs. And it's good. But it's definitely, when people start saying that they don't have a strategy, or at the very least that they're like more working on it, right? Or they're just ignoring it. That's like a huge red flag, because that's if you've written good unit tests, you have good requirements. You have good requirements, you're going to have a deterministic output. This is another one, like, again, I always talk in like these metaphors or these stories. So there's Johnny Carson used to be in the NBC here, and he had a character called Karnik. And Karnik was like one of those carny fortune tellers, right? He'd hold a card up to his head and he would say the answer before reading the question. And I use that sort of scenario to talk about all these people who have the answer, right? It's like whatever tool that they know, right? Oh, it's MongoDB. We're just going to use MongoDB. It's like, we're going to use this. Like everything's a vector database now. Everything is, just use ChatGPT. They have the answer without understanding the problem. And there's a lot of good tools out there. I mean, if all your data is in MongoDB, and like you said, you have just just put the vectors in there and you have one source. You don't have to worry about state, etc. Like, bravo, go for it. But don't start with that as the answer, right? Evaluate it and come to it. That's just something that, and again, we are agnostic at MC+A. Like, we work with every, I want to say every search tool, so many different search tools, so many different platforms. Enterprises themselves have 20 to 30 different sources, and everyone's got their own brush on whatever. But you can't really have that, these days.
So, we started with, search not being cool for many years, and now it's not that cool, but everybody does it, right? So, in the last, I don't know, year or two, you had Mongo add for free text search and vector search, Aerospike, Single Store, and I can think of quite a few more that inherently are not even close to doing anything like search, but they all have search, right? And if you compare them to products that were built to do search, like Vespa, Elasticsearch, Solar, and many others, the difference in features is so huge, right? So we see customers like that, basically saying, yeah, I have one tool that does everything. No, the tools are not a silver, there's no silver bullet in those kind of things. But I think this is a valid point. I mean, if you do have a database that is serving what you need, and all you need is to kind of experiment a little bit at this point in some search and vectors and so on, vector search is not rocket science. It's very well understood. I don't think there's many products that do it significantly different that you should look at them. There's just some features here and there. I don't know, like Vespa can do tensors and not just vectors, which is might be interesting. But other than that, yeah, I mean, if you just try to experiment, you can use that. But if you want to go deeper, then you might need to actually look for the right tool for the job.
Right. Now let's talk about saving money, which everyone likes to do. Have less shards, size your cluster correctly, index only what's necessary to answer the problem. Do you have any suggestions? Any ideas that come to mind?
Yeah, well, you know we do. So basically, what I've been doing with my team for the last 15 years is to get called into situations like this and just jump into it and figure out, right? So the number of shards, the sudden search spike. We discussed agents. So suddenly you have more traffic all coming from searches and so on. So very meta discussion, but we basically took Gen AI and did a lot of context engineering, and basically we built this platform that we used to use it for emergency monitoring on clusters and help customers with it. And then we just took those dashboards and started creating some root cause analysis that is manual and some cluster health checkups and so on. And now with Gen AI, we are actually able to take all of that context and really reason about it in a very, very meaningful, very, very easy way. And that's essentially Pulse. One thing, so saving money, one thing we actually did was to be able to find ways to reduce cluster sizes, cluster cost. And that's also something that we have. But in the end of the day, I think to get to the right cluster size and to actually start saving money, it is a matter of trial and error, and this is something that really should be out there. It's not like there's this rule. You do this amount of data, this amount of vectors, this amount of searches. You need this cluster, that cost. There's many variants and many things that you can try. For example, surprisingly,
it's like Formula One. Right?
Yeah, it is. I mean depending on how you,
more horsepower, more friction,
drag,
right? Downforce, more downforce, et cetera. But it's like, okay, but how to achieve that? Well, that's so like, I think that's something that I wanted to jump in to say, like, we generally know the things to do, like Formula One, but to get those to win at Formula One, you're working on microseconds. So we had a case where we were rescoring documents based on, it was like a eBay type of use case. And so we wanted to promote results from more prominent sellers. And so when result came in, if the seller was prominent, we gave that result a boost up. But we sent it over as a object, and then it had to be pushed into a float, and then the calculation, and for each result, we were looking at, you're laughing. It's like, you start adding up microseconds, and you're like, dang. So what we ended up doing was storing them as integers and getting rid of the floating point precision. So just think about, and this is something you do actually with money. Anyone's play with databases with money. We never store huge systems. We never store floats as money. The 2 digits, you just move the 2 digits over, and you take the 2 digits back when you're showing it, because floating points have a loss of precision. So the same concept. So you just use integers, but that, 5 times as fast. Just switching it to that, and we had the same amount of relevancy. So there's these basics. So there is this we don't know until we know. there's foundations, and
Yep.
we're doing the same thing that as a Formula One team is, to try to figure out how to tweak a little bit of performance. Jesse was mentioning having 180, blah, 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 billionaire, that's a lot of documents. And you're like, okay, well, can the database even send us those, right? So can we get a stream of updates from the database? Because, okay, where's the cluster? There's various points of failure, et cetera.
Yep.
So, but I think the right sizing your cluster is the biggest thing. Pulse from Big Data Boutique will identify some of those things, and you can always have a consultant look at it as well, to plug in.
We never expect any system to do this automatically, but we do expect it to very much assist anyone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah, like, this is odd. You should look at it, right? I think you mentioned this as well, choosing the right vector dimension. So I think there's ones out there are 2000 plus, 786, et cetera. So finding the one, making them bits or quantization of those, stores it. But there's trade-offs there that you have to consider. Reduce your data, right? So that a company that was spending 500 to 20,000, they knew they had 3 copies of it. They had at least 3 times the duplicates that people just kind of moved around. Those are some big ones, and we'll probably post some other ideas out there as well. And the last slide, and then it's just a complete free for all for whoever's left.
And yeah, Jesse, to just respond that Opser do not longer exist, but yeah, Pulse does essentially what Opser was doing, except I think we have a little bit of a different approach, and happy to show you.
Yeah, Opser was a good tool. It got acquired by Elastic.
Mm-hmm.
There was some disruption with the product team from that, I hear. They're incorporating the features into the subscription tier, so it's kind of puts out outreach in a lot of use cases. Whereas, not to really plug you, you're indifferent to the platform, where it's run, etc. We use it ourselves as well. And then lastly is like the right tool for the right job. I mean, Jesse mentioned the Infinity, the SQL Server. I'm not familiar with the latest edition of SQL Server in terms of the search capabilities, but they were always, I think Jesse also said it, they're garbage, but it's true, it is garbage, but it can do things that you don't treat. I mean, we have customers that do this, but you don't treat your search system as a database, right? It's not it's not the system of record. So don't do that. There's no shortage of vector databases, so whatever your affinity is, go
Everybody
with it.
does vector today.
Yeah. It's redundant, in a large sense. It's like saying you can query out of a database. I have personal preferences. Again, going back to the wall of dead search company swag, we tend to look at stability. So Jesse, hyperscaler is great. My Microsoft SQL Server is not going to go anywhere, or something like that. The search companies tend to have about a 5 to 10 year life cycle, and then they get acquired. So either they have to, as they get investors, they either have to expand their market, or they reach their limit and they get acquired. So if you look at Ativio, they got acquired by ServiceNow. All right, so ServiceNow is like, oh, we need a search tool. Boom, we'll just buy Ativio, and then they kind of consume them in, and that's the end of Ativio. So you're out of luck if you're a Ativio customer, or you're a Google Search Appliance customer, because they're calling, or an Endeca customer, or iPhrase customer.
The fun thing is that Rockset was acquired by OpenAI before they were able to put, as far as I know, to put vector search capabilities in it. Otherwise, you would have Rockset having vector search capabilities as well.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, that was our perspective is we're agnostic. We come in and we look at the client. For the most part, I would say from a technology perspective, I don't know the mathematical number, but probably a majority of the search replatforms that we've done aren't because of technology. They're not, because of politics or preference or something else. And we would really like to see that investment be put to the governance of the solution and in diet and exercise to make it better. That would be our recommendation. I'm happy to see if I can turn on mics or cameras or whatever. We can stay. I have a few minutes myself. Cizmar, I know it's late. You got kids who are, the other side of his screen are like kids just running around like lighting fires and shooting fireworks at each other. He's maintaining the calm very well, folks. Thank you again for staying up late and bantering with me. Looking forward to our partnership, and thanks everyone for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and thank you, Michael, for inviting me.
Excellent. Cheers.